Today we are sitting down with Sundar Subramanian, whose album Electric Currents was just released on Bandcamp on January 15th and is available for purchase in digital and physical formats, as well as streaming on major platforms all over the internet. Sundar, thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So Sundar is a freelance composer and guitarist and theorist and teacher in Ottawa now, and we met at the 21st Century Guitar Conference in Ottawa, where I heard him play his piece Shimmer that'll be on this album, as well as, you know, getting to interact with him some. And I figured that since he just had this record come out, that it would be a great time for us to bring him here and have him talk about his work a little bit, get into some of the pieces on the albums and the various things that he's interested in doing with the guitar. So Sundar, just to start, let's talk a little bit about you and your history with the guitar and how you kind of got into it, and what led you a little bit to where you are now, without, you know, too long of a life story. But
Right.
if we could kind of get a little bit of background about you and
Okay. Yeah.
your music.
Started playing when I was around 10, mainly just kind of inspired by like popular rock music of the time, the late 80s, early 90s at that time. And had a teacher who steered me a bit more towards classical guitar when I was a teenager. Had a little bit of jazz before that, and yeah, from there I really um, developed a strong appreciation for and interest in contemporary music for the guitar, um, and I still mostly played. I only had an acoustic and classical at home, but would like with a friend's instrument play electric in like in a band where um, kind of inspired by artists like Sonic Youth. We would do things with like play the instrument with preparations or letter openers and experiment with sound that way. Um, and Yeah, in university, I actually started university as a science major, but a course I took on as an elective on the history of late 20th century avant-garde composition actually really fascinated me and drew me in. Um, the and I I just put together a portfolio that summer with just an electric guitar and a Tascam Porta Studio cassette mixer. Um, I was still, I would say by looking back now, I wouldn't describe myself as exceptionally proficient at that point. But I put together something that the professor was accepted as sufficient to be admitted to the composition course in the music program, and I suppose I just went from there. Worked a lot with prepared electric guitar. Um, I always continued studying the classical, but for a long time was not confident enough about my classical playing to write that much for it or to perform my like as much with that instrument. That's actually I've been doing more of that more recently. But yeah, and then my eventually did a PhD in composition at SUNY Buffalo, where my dissertation piece was actually four movements of different guitar music defined very broadly. So there was a movement of that was a serial composition for classical guitar, a movement that's just prepared electric guitar with no effects, a movement that was a completely like recorded digital piece with based on guitar samples, and then a piece for electric guitar with real-time digital signal processing. Then take us all the way to the kind of material that's on this album, which is actually, I would say, probably overall a little more on the accessible or populist side compared to what I was writing as a doctoral student. I realized I wanted to write music. It was actually kind of the opposite realization in a way as what you were discussing with Matt Sargent in the last interview, where both of you were talking about how you like to distance yourself from the instrument in terms of like, you know, what it comes intuitively as a player, right? And keep your writing as a separate thing from that. If I'm not like, and I guess I realized like I was, I mean, I was doing kind of maybe too much of that for myself in a way that I wanted to kind of go back to writing at the instrument, to having that physical, immediate, intuitive connection with the music I was making. I applied for a grant to write a piece that was almost like a contemporary take on the ideas in the Robert Fripp and Brian Eno projects from the 70s, with modal improvisation over looping. But I was doing it in a multi-track digital environment within Ableton Live, and designing some of the effects with Max MSP that in the Max for Live environment. But it was it was a tonal piece. It was kind of, I guess, a modern jazz or jazz fusion informed piece, and it was also something that was difficult for me to play. So it got me to start playing, practicing again. And that was a piece called Locks and Ripples that I completed in 2013, which is on an earlier EP. And I guess that's really what led to a lot of the style that you see on the album. I continued writing some more music like that, and more recently, I had, especially since I kind of left academia and have been freelancing and teaching privately. I'm teaching the instrument a lot more often than I'm teaching theory or composition or music technology. And I guess my playing had become an even bigger part of my musical life. So I'm finding now that I was wanting to write more music that's more immediate in terms of the playing, and less maybe about the digital side of it. So some of that's why a number of the pieces on the album are really comparatively stripped down compared to Shimmer's, maybe the strongest example of the multi-track looping based style.
Yeah, great. And so these five original compositions that you have on this new album, what's the time span that you were writing these in?
So Shimmer, I guess I started working on while I was working at Clark University. I was teaching full time in music technology there for a few years, and I guess when I had time, I would try working on this piece. So that was the first sketches of it were probably in 2015, and then within the last couple of years that really started coming together. I think the first performance of it was 2018 at an event that Julian Bertino put on at University of Ottawa, and then later again that year at the the conference of the Canadian University Music Society at MacEwan University in Edmonton. So the piece was essentially composed at that point. And I performed it again at the 21st Century Festival at the concert where you also performed. And then the recording was it took place in bits and pieces over the next couple of years, really, of with that one. Now, Processional, for example, is quite a different story. It was originally written kind of fairly quickly as a wedding processional for my sister's wedding. But yeah, it was none of the improvised solos were part of it. It was right. So it was just it was based on a really 4-chord cycle that was developed and varied in kind of, I guess, a D Lydian or modal space overall. I played it, and I played kind of a looser improvisational version of it at another wedding more recently. And now, one thing when I talk about how, like, playing became a bigger part of what I did, I also kind of embarked on a little sort of informal self study of jazz a little bit in the last couple of years since coming back to Ottawa, and improvising kind of within that idiomatic tonal sort of style, and going out to jams sometimes making a fool of myself, but sometimes
I've been there too,
handling myself moderately. And so yeah, I wanted to just, I guess, loosen the piece up a bit, and included 4 passages of improvised chord melody soloing within Processional, right, based on kind of more essentially jazz-derived harmonic progressions. So that version of it is really dates back to last year, and Daydream is based on, I mean, that main theme, I mean, is actually something I wrote as a teenager, even, and never figure out completely where I was, what to do with it, and so I figured I would, where the high E string is tuned down to C sharp, and from the F sharp to G sharp, right at the 7th fret between the first 2 strings. So yeah, I wanted to, have a piece on there where I actually play with a pick and do strumming, and a more up-tempo piece. And so yeah, I built that theme out into a fuller composition with a couple of key changes and with an improvisational kind of somewhat jazz-informed solo in the middle section. Again, it's all solo, like chord melody based sort of playing. December and Breeze were both are both improvised pieces. December was one again that I've been in. It was originally called, I think I was just calling it Randomly, and it was done first in 2018 as an attempt to kind of pare down a little bit the Ableton Live loop-based style I was working in, so that I mean, some of the Shimmer, for example, I think has like 8 or 9 tracks in Ableton, where this one's just 2 tracks, and it's in a way a little closer to the Frippendino style of just keeping a loop going and then kind of playing over it, and then kind of recording over that, like overdubbing over that loop. So that was one I just kind of developed through playing live at various gigs. And the recording that's on the album was taken from when I was, I guess, cramming, practicing and preparing for a gig I accepted at the last minute in December 2019. This was one of the jams I recorded, and listening
Mm-hmm.
back, I was happy with it. Yeah, that went on the album. And Yeah, and then I thought I wanted to keep a prepared guitar improvisation on the album. So yeah, Breeze was the last piece to be put together for that, and that was an improvise. It was basically a single take improvisation.
And so it sounds like these five pieces have really been kind of coming together over the span of many years, actually. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to me that there's a pretty wide range of style and kind of sound throughout this record as well, where these two fairly early pieces, Daydream and Processional, sound like they have fairly simple setups.
Mhm.
And then as we get into some of the more recent work, there's a lot more going on. Um, and so it's kind of cool to see then in this record this kind of progression of you almost as a composer and a musician and the various things that you're interested in and how you're using the electric guitar to really draw out a lot of different aspects of music that you're gravitating towards. um let's talk a little bit about those first two pieces a little bit more and just talk a little bit more
Sure.
about kind of what you were going after. And there you have these very particular sort of sound worlds that you're living in both pieces that are different from one another. Just talk a little bit about how you approached finding the sound that brought these pieces to life a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, Daydream was like I said, the that main theme. I mean, it's almost like a riff, I guess, and
Yeah.
that I wrote as a teenager, and it was. I mean, it was actually originally kind of conceived as like something that would be part of a rock song, or like, and um, I mean, which it almost still is in a
Yeah.
way. It's
Yeah, it does sound kind of riffy.
yeah. Yeah, and it was I called it Daydream because I mean a friend at the time compared it to Sonic Youth's Daydream Nation album.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and So yeah, I guess I that was also why I wanted to. I mean, you may have experienced this as well as a classically trained player that sometimes a pick is almost it's almost like it's not as comfortable to play
Mm.
with. And yeah, so I wanted to keep it kind of true to like the strumming style of in of like kind of more of a rock kind of strumming style. So
Mm-hmm.
with a pick and with like kind of strumming almost the entire instrument almost most of the time throughout. And I wanted to. I think I have I tend to default I think to like kind of slower, more meditative kind of music that and I wanted to force myself to play up tempo and be able to keep something moving at a reasonably quicker clip. So that was it was all part of that, but also it's a solo guitar piece. So to kind of have it's almost like trying to have like what two guitarists in a band might be doing at the same time on a
Mm-hmm.
single instrument. Um, Through these I guess the voice leading within these denser harmonies. um, and then yeah, processional was the reverse in a way, right? That was me. um, well, I was writing something on short notice when I first wrote the basic idea of the piece, and it was so I was kind of writing to my defaults, and it was also an event where kind of a comparatively slower piece was appropriate, and a simpler one. Um, and that's yeah, so that's definitely like that was a finger picking piece, and it's kind of more like a a little bit of like, I guess, a softer contemporary classical sort of piece, but again informed by jazz.
Yeah. Maybe we can move on and talk a little bit about December and Shimmer, which those are the two that are really getting really heavy into your Ableton Live setup, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Um, and so, what is it about Ableton Live that attracts you to making music in that platform? And to what degree, if any, do you struggle with it being, something that could be where you have this tool that's mostly geared toward pop musicians, and you're trying to work in it as somebody who's not working in that idiom? Right.
And when you say, you know, built for pop music, it was specifically built for DJs wanting something to work with in a live setting, right? Being to be able to mix and process things on the fly,
Mm-hmm.
uh, right? As opposed to, I mean, Logic, which is also, of course, used by pop musicians, but in the studio context more. So what, yeah, things that I guess attract me to Ableton are both that element of it, that it is it lends itself so well to real time working, to perform. It's, to, you can perform with it, right? So when I perform the those other pieces live, I do also just do them through Ableton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that the but also the other thing with Ableton is the Max for Live functionality, where you can design effects or
Right.
instruments using Max MSP and then use them within the DAW of Ableton Live, which is attractive to me, I guess, on both sides. Both that it gives the freedom to design your own effects, and conversely, um, since I'm not really a master Max MSP programmer, I can still do most of the things within the DAW
Yeah.
itself, right? I just I can use Max MSP to design um, effects.
Great. Yeah. Um, so maybe we could get into a little bit of you know, the setup here for one of these pieces.
If we look at the Ableton Live set, it's still got the old title here.
And
All right, so this is a simple just 2-track piece. Yeah, maybe pull up Shimmer later on since it's the more impressive looking one. But so you can see, for instance, if I click here, you can see right the where, so when it says note C# -2, that's C# is just the button, the number one button on the MIDI foot controller.
mm-hmm.
It's set up, to send out the note message, the MIDI note C#. But I'm not using it to play a C#. I'm using, right, C# is being translated into ARM track 1.
Right. Yeah. It's a
And
trigger.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then so G, which is 7, is what triggers the looper to start recording or overdubbing or play, and also means that if I'm looking at track 2, it'll switch back my view to track 1, right? And we can look at, so everything's going through on track 1. Things are going through this randomized flanger effect that I designed just by right. It's relatively simple. It's just, I mean, it's a basic flanger effect, but with random number generators controlling the rate of flanging,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the depth of flanging, kind of within these maximums. And it's set up for stereo, so you could get you have very different effects in both channels. Now the this effect here is a randomized delay, effect I made just by modifying, tweaking one of the effects that comes with Max for Live, um, and so it just it's essentially the drops delay effect, but with feedback and delay time randomized um, within, again, kind of within this maximum. I don't use that effect a lot in this piece, but use it sometimes, and you can see it's triggered by D sharp, which is the button number 3.
Um, these effects that you've created for this piece,
Mm-hmm.
um, what sort of effect for the listener are you trying to achieve here? You've got a lot of effects that are controlling the random controlling of certain
Right,
variables here,
right.
um, and what does that do for the overall feel of the piece and for you as a player, where you're potentially getting fluctuations that you've never heard before in the actual processing of the sound?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess the thing with I mean, in both of those cases, with the thing with I mean, a flanger is, I mean, it's sort of this psychedelic kind of
Mm-hmm.
wavy sound, but most flanger effects, I find, like, because it operates on this regular pattern of like the waviness is always happening along this regular pattern. Um, there's something about it that I feel like it's more of a psychedelic wash if it's less regularized, right? If And I guess that's the idea there. And with the delay, I think in both, yeah, it's again just trying to break out of the kind of the rigid regularity of how those effects are conventionally used. In that, I mean, a lot of the time when things echo back, or especially in when you're working with technology, it's things don't happen according to this strict regulated pattern, I guess. So I think that's also part of it. I believe my partner saw it as kind of a metaphor for the way we interact with technology more generally, in that it's these machines are supposed to make things more regulated and
Mm-hmm.
efficient for us, but so often they are random and unpredictable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's actually shift gears then and talk a little bit about the one arrangement of someone else's work that's on this
Yes. Right.
recording.
Yeah.
This is a piece by Sean Bell called Currents 2. It was originally written for classical guitar, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And Steve Thatchik has recorded this.
Yeah. He has. Yeah.
Right. And and you have taken this piece on and put it on the electric guitar, used some effects, and just before we get into any decisions that you made for um, deciding what to use when on this piece, let's just talk a little bit about taking a classical guitar composition and trying to superimpose it on the electric guitar and any challenges that are there. I know that someone who's done both
Mhm.
um, in performance, there's a really different sense of touch on each
Yes.
instrument. There's the classical guitar that's all about trying to project as much as
Yeah.
possible, and on the electric guitar, you're really trying to suppress all the
Yes.
stuff
Right.
that gets amplified that we don't want. So, what are some of the challenges that you had in taking this piece that was conceived for classical guitar and making it work on the electric, given the challenges and the differences between these two instruments?
Interestingly, with this particular piece, I don't know that I actually do that much different with my right hand. It's
Hmm.
I mean, maybe because it is all like, so much of it is quick finger picking, kind of with the entire with kind of all six strings a lot of the time, or with a lot of strings. It's actually, I mean, the strings need to resonate,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, in any case. And actually, I found, especially the introductory section, where it's almost all harmonics. And this was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to try it on electric in the first place. Is the harmonics speak and sustain more easily on an
Right.
electric to begin with. And so actually, to me, it always felt like it was kind of crying out to be played on an electric. And,
Yeah.
because there is, I mean, and, there is so much of it is harmonics or percussive effects, which again, like, can be that much more percussive on an electric instrument, with especially with like amplification and effects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that was yeah. In those ways, it's maybe, I mean, I guess in some ways it's easier to play on
Huh.
electric. I find, I actually did just do a recorded on classical in the past week as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that was of course how I first learned the piece, way back. But yeah, it is like that much more of a challenge to like get all of those harmonics. I mean, where you're barring all six strings and doing and
Mm-hmm.
like playing harmonics
Yeah.
across the body of the guitar, like, to get all of those harmonics to speak and to sustain and project, on the classical. Um, yeah, I didn't find resonance to actually be an issue so much with adapting this particular piece to guitar, because I found the resonances all work with the piece.
Yeah.
Actually, it was another thing that, like, I mean, when I was learning it on classical, I wanted it to resonate more. So,
Yeah. Well, and with having to use the bridge pickup to make those harmonics speak really well, you get a lot more
mhm.
clarity when you have a lot going on, as opposed to,
Yeah,
if you were on like a more, bass heavy sound, it could get really muddy really fast. So, um did you work with Sean on workshopping the piece at all? And what kind of things did you two, if so, work through in those sessions together?
yeah. So this piece actually also has a long history.
Yeah.
Right, it's Sean wrote it in 1995, or published it in 1995, and William Beauvais, I think, did the first recording in the
Okay.
90s on the disc Traces. Um, and it's funny because his hearing of it, my hearing, and Steve Patrick's are all actually quite different from each other.
Mm.
Um, uh, I mean, Williams will always be definitive to me, but he plays it very much as a classical, like, even like a Spanish classical guitar kind of piece. And but yeah, it was I learned the piece from him when I was studied with him, when I was in Toronto between 2002 and 2005. And As I say, like, my hearing of it was different from his. I mean, I remember, like, even in lessons at the time, I was, say, like, there were parts that made me think of Metallica, and he heard something completely different.
Hmm.
Um, but but yeah, to me, it was, like I said, it was kind of crying out for an electric arrangement. So once I learned it on classical, I actually started playing it on electric, even back then, with effects pedals. Um, it wasn't always the same arrangement that's on the album, but that was when I started doing it. So I mean, I think '05, and performed it that way a number of times. Although I hadn't in a really long time, until before I made the album. So it had probably been about 10 years since I'd last played it. But the answer to the question then, sorry, is no. I was not working with Sean Bell on the electric arrangement when
Okay.
I first started doing that. I did correspond with him, and I let him know that I was doing that and performing it, and I sent him in like an early recording that I did back then, which he was always very like kind of enthusiastic about the idea and supportive of it, and was happy that I was performing it that way. Then when I did this recording though for the album, I did send him the early mixes to get his feedback, before finalizing it and committing it to the album. He was again quite supportive and relatively hands off. Made a few suggestions that were, I mean, more about the play, like the playing and things, but in a couple spots. But overall was he didn't. No, he was happy with the way I arranged it for electric. We didn't really workshop that per se.
And there wasn't anything that he said like, "Oh, I hate the way that you
No,
did that," or no. Okay,
not at all,
so
yeah.
there weren't any sounds on it that he was like allergic to.
No,
at
that
all.
was no, that part of it he was happy with. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I guess one difference with going back to the last question, with converting it to electric, since it does resonate, the instrument does sustain and resonate more. There's the slow section, which is also quite bass heavy. That I play I think a fair bit slower on in the electric version.
Yeah, I did notice that your timestamp on it was considerably longer than Thatchik's.
Yeah, I think I also do more of the repeats than he
yeah,
does.
I figured there were some repeats too, but
because my tempo is like the fast parts are the fast parts are quite fast still, but yeah, the slow part, that slow middle section takes up the majority of the timestamp at this on my electric recording now, I think. Yeah, because it does ring and resonate so much more. That I found worked really well, really slowly on electric with a bit of delay, quite a bit of reverb, some light flanging.
Yeah, and what guided your choices for the effect changes throughout this thing, and to what degree are they easy to execute live? Because it sounds like there's a lot of changing going on throughout the piece. And it sounds like there could be a lot of pedalboard tap dancing going on.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of is pedalboard tap dancing, and that was something I just practiced that a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really kind of intuitive. It was just kind of what I thought. I was just bringing out what the characters that were already there in those contrasting passages in the piece. So that with the harmonics, it's just and it's a fairly repetitive section. I mean, there's a little bit of delay there, bringing out more treble there, but it's a very, very clean, light, trebly sound in that passage. That's what I was going for. Those percussive passages. I mean, even in the acoustic, in the classical recording, it's already a strong contrast, and I was just bringing out that contrast a bit more with an envelope filter that just amplifies the percussive nature of those attacks, and then the stuff where it's all stopped pitches with the bass melody. All right, I played just I recorded very dry. Um, just for that to stand out. It's not light and spacey. It's not percussive. I mean, it also needs to be. I mean, especially on electric, really clear.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I kept that as clean, dry, and clean as possible. I arpeggiated passages with ringing harmonics in the upper part of the instrument that are still a little bit slower. And again, I place those slower on electric than I do on classical, just to let those sounds, those sonorities sustain a bit more. And so the octave splitter pedal was just I think just allows those harmonics to ring and shimmer a little more.
Yeah.
Um,
Great. Yeah. And maybe we can talk about Breeze a little bit. This is the prepared guitar piece.
yeah,
Talk a little bit about the types of preparations that you used. You said it was completely improvised, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Um, and so talk about the preparations you used and what kinds of stimuli prompted you to use those preparations.
Most of the techniques that are used in that piece are techniques I've used kind of in prepared guitar improvisation over, just kind of over the course of my career. Um, it was, I guess, I mean, I remember like reading about John Cage when I was a teenager, and then the like campus radio station played I think almost the entirety of there was a tribute album that was released in 1993 that featured Patrick Moraz was playing the prepared piano pieces
Mm-hmm.
on it, and that really fascinated me. The idea of like just that you could transform the sound of the instrument that way. So what I use there is I use a art eraser on the strings at harmonic nodes,
Okay.
um, and at a different node on every string. And that idea was actually originally suggested to me by a pianist who prepared his piano that way for a piece I wrote with prepared piano.
Mm.
I had asked him to do it using another method. I don't even remember what I asked him to do originally, but yeah, he suggested the art eraser, and I found it, and it sounded great, and I've kind of been using it on guitar ever since.
Cool.
Um, so it's at the 12th fret harmonic on the high E string, the 7th fret on the B string, 5th on the G string, then 4th on the 4th third, and then the near the 6th fret, that 7th harmonic
Yeah.
on the low E string, which essentially turns the whole guitar into kind of the first tetrachord of a D major scale.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is I mean, I reversed the order of harmonics for other pieces that I've done. But yeah, I did it this way that for this one, and then I used like things like the actual technical name for this thing at a hardware store is a mill bastard file. It's a 6-inch file used for filing wood. That Yeah, it's great both for like scraping strings and also for like resting on top of strings. You can like stroke it with a slide or a coin, and you get these kind of really kind of high shimmering resonant ringing resonances through the pickups, right, as it hears kind of the metal ringing on the other side. Um, a letter opener that I weave through the strings.
Mm.
Um, Slide, the Ebo, coin. It was I think that might have been it for that particular recording. It was, I guess, comparatively pared down. Other ones that I'm fond of are like metal ruler as a bow,
Mm.
and a comb to for like tremolo
Yeah.
on single strings.
Yeah. And how did you structure the improvisation, if at all, or was it just completely intuitive, or did you have any sort of what makes it breeze and not something else?
Yeah, yeah. Right. So yeah, it was. So I that theme played on the prepared strings, like the harmonics, right? That's basically that D major tetrachord, um, based on like that derived from that. That I had just worked out immediately prior to recording that take, and I structured it as a sort of rondo, um,
Hmm.
where it keeps coming back to that theme, and each episode in goes in a somewhat different direction and focuses on a different sort of sound world angle,
Yeah.
I guess. And yeah, and I just generally an overall like arc-like
Mm-hmm.
shape to it. And yeah, it was a breezy summer day when I recorded it. That was
That makes it breeze.
yes.
Great. And you're doing a virtual launch party for
Yeah,
this, right? And when is that?
plan to.
Let's get some details on that for when we get this thing up.
Yes, yeah. So planned for February 6th, as I'm going to pre-record a performance and release the video that day. Hopefully, if everything goes as planned.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll make sure to get some more details on that in the description box. And yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today and talk about your music. It's been really, really great. And I wish you a lot of success with the recording. And we'll have some links down below for people who are interested in checking it out. So thanks so much, Sundar.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.